Today I'm going to have you guys, when we focus on poetry, really focus on structure, poetic structure, and we're specifically going to look at closed open form poetry. These are just talking about patterns of organization of a poem. And when we talk about that, sorry, my slide is not advancing for some odd reason. When we talk about that, we're talking about the overall structure or shape of a poem. So form could exist on many levels, as you see in the slide. There could be patterns of sound and image, structures of syntax and thought, the phrases and lines, or even like the whole poem. The two main types of structure would be a fixed form or closed form, which follows a prescribed model, or the open or free verse type of poem, with no established patterns of meter and rhyme. But as you guys are going to hear, open or free form doesn't imply formlessness. And I'm going to show you two examples that are super clear of that, and a third that hopefully after you think about it, you'll see. Basically, poets can capitalize on the freedom that they're given in terms of creating their own forms, or take a traditional form and play with it. Robert Frost was once quoted as saying, "Writing free verse is like playing tennis with the net down, and no verse is free for the poet who wants to do a good job." Basically implying that there's a lot of thought that goes into how poems are organized, whether closed form or open form. All right. So the first poem I'm going to ask you guys to take a quick look at is The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So take a look. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. In only 16 words, this poem demonstrates how form and sound can not only reinforce an image, but can actually create meaning. In this piece, Williams creates a visual image analogous to a still life painting. He does it with his words. He does it with how the words appear on the page, almost like three words being supported by the one word below, kind of like what a wheelbarrow looks like. Instead of treating the text as a sentence, he breaks it up into 4 couplets that guide the way we experience the language and thus the ideas. The poem is written in free verse with no capitalization or internal punctuation, so we have to approach it word by word. The enjambment of the poem forces us to pause or to look and notice the new word below. There's a ton of analysis out there about this poem, and if you want, in your textbook on page 29 of the Jago textbook, you can read a further analysis of this open structure poem. Here's another one that I think is just super fun. E.E. Cummings, if you're not familiar with him, he can drive you crazy because he doesn't like punctuation or capitalization, but it's typically with a purpose. And if you look at this, I can't even really tell you the title because the title is L parentheses A. But if you were to rearrange this into a straight line, which is obviously not what the poet intended, it looks like L, a leaf falls, oneliness. If you remove the parentheses, it says loneliness. Think about it. A leaf falling. Talk about a traditional symbol of loneliness. You can also notice that it strikes the eye, the poem strikes the eye as a series of letters that stream downwards like a leaf falling. There's the initial L that looks like a 1. There's the word oneliness. The movement of this poem is just impressive, what he accomplishes in just this seemingly simple poem. So here's when I'm going to have you guys pause, or you might really want to pause in order to answer the questions. But Walt Whitman, this is another, not everybody's all about the poem matching what the meaning is in terms of what it looks like. But there's still some open poems that, though not a specific rhyme scheme or following a specific structure, you definitely can take a look at the structure and draw some conclusions. So hit pause when you're ready and answer a couple questions about When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. So I hope you answer those questions. Next, we're going to talk about closed form, fixed form. So structure is shaped by stanza and rhyme scheme. There's 3 basic stanzaic forms, but that doesn't mean that some poets write giant stanzas or different kind of stanzas. You probably have heard of the couplet, the heroic couplet, or the rhyming couplet. The tercet, which would be a stanza with 3 lines. Quatrain, which is often the most common, it's a stanza with 4 lines. The 3 major ones that we are going to focus on as far as the closed form will be the sonnets, the 2 kinds of sonnets that you see listed here, the sestina and the villanelle. That doesn't mean that there are other traditional forms, traditional types of poems that you've probably heard of, read before, previously, or just know of too that have a very clear form. But we're going to focus on sonnets, sestinas, and villanelles. So, some sonnet specifics. There are two listed here, the two main ones. But there actually are other sonnets that exist in the world, like the Spenserian sonnet, the unidentifiable sonnet, if any of you guys have read Asmodeus, kind of like a sonnet, but different. But anyway, the Shakespearean sonnet, again, it's a 14-line poem. There are 3 4-line quatrains with a specific rhyming pattern that you see listed here, followed by a concluding 2-line couplet that also rhymes. The third stanza usually provides the turn or the volta, and those last 2 lines, that couplet usually kind of close with a witty remark. Now, again, that's like the perfect form. Now, that doesn't mean that all poets follow that. You might find a poem that instead of having them all separated into different stanzas, it's like the stanza, one giant stanza with this rhyming pattern. It could be separated into 2 different stanzas with this rhyming pattern. So you just got to be aware of that. The Petrarchan or the Italian sonnet, again, those you can use those names interchangeably. It's another 14-line poem with an 8-line octave and a 6-line sestet, with again some very clear rhyming patterns that I have listed for you here. The rhyming pattern of the sestet could vary, but again, when you're looking at sonnets, you're typically looking for those 14 lines that helps you identify it, and then you can even go a step further and be able to identify which type of sonnet it actually is. It could help you just in terms of interpreting meaning and where there's a shift and things like that. The volta for the Italian sonnet is after the octave, and traditionally, the way the poem creates meaning is that the octave raises an issue or expresses a doubt, and the sestet resolves the issue or doubt in some way. So, a couple more complicated forms are the sestina and the villanelle. Not nearly as popular as the sonnet, but still there are some, which I'll show you, that are very popular of these. Well, the villanelle especially. But the sestina is a 39-line poem, and if you know your word root, sestina might help you to keep in mind the number 6. 6 stanzas of 6 lines each, followed by a 3-line conclusion. There's an extremely strict repetition of 6 key words throughout these poems. The reason this poem even existed in the beginning was that it was originally sung to music as a competition. These performers, called troubadours, would try to outwit, show their ability with words to win over the ladies. So a lot of these sestinas were originally about courtly love. The villanelle is a 19-line poem with, again, a very complex rhyming pattern. So I'm going to read through some of these lines to you, but you can kind of pause and look at it. And again, the samples will really help you with this. So villanelle has 2 repeating rhymes and 2 refrains. It actually even repeats almost lines like I think I already said, like a refrain. And there are 5 3-line tercets and a final 4-line quatrain. The power lies in the villanelle. The power lies in its repeated lines and their subtly shifting sense of meaning over the course of the poem. So you'll see some examples in class tomorrow of all of these, but for now, I'd like you to take a look at a couple poems and answer a few questions about them. You're going to answer questions about what form they are, as well as some interpretation of how structure helps create meaning. So here's a really famous sonnet by William Shakespeare, and I'd like you to just take a look at it. You may have actually even studied this your junior year. I know a lot of the junior classes study sonnets, Shakespeare sonnets. So I'd like you to take a look and answer some questions about what kind of sonnet this is and everything like that. Lastly, here is a Dylan Thomas poem. You might remember this. There's a recent movie that came out with this poem in it. Actually, a couple that have it. But I'd like you to take a look at this and also answer the questions about poetic structure related to this poem. We will deal with a lot of these structural, the importance of structure and how that relates to meaning and how it connects to meaning more in class in the coming days. Oops, you don't need to do that. That's editing.